What's up, you guys? Welcome back to the channel. It's me, B. Riley, and today we are going to start filling those screw holes. Ow, my cat just bit me. I'm sorry. Didn't mean to swear. Jameson, what the hell? Last episode we finished off, we were just getting ready to actually go ahead and do the type bond trick where we use kebab sticks and drop them down in there with the type bond. We've already done that, so we've got the holes actually filled. And today we're gonna actually go ahead and start painting and start bringing it around and kind of tidying up the facade of the guitar. So go ahead and stay tuned. Okay, so we've got all of our holes filled. And you can see actually right here the pores of the bamboo pointing up and outward. If these were a little bit bigger, what you could do is you can actually cut your plug so that the grain runs west and east, and that'll actually hide this a little bit more. Now, typically speaking, you wouldn't want to use this type of method on a translucent finish, but there are so many holes in this thing at this point that, to be brutally honest, we're trying to salvage the original finish. We're trying to keep the original finish. We're trying to prevent ourselves from having to refinish this whole thing. And a lot of the finish is actually in really good nick once it's been, cut and buffed again. So we've got these little holes, which is good. And now our next step is to go ahead, now that we've wet sanded this and we've got a bit of a dish. If you put your finger over it, it should kind of feel like those McDonald's cup buttons when you push them down. Remember when you were a kid, you push down all the buttons at the same time? It should kind of feel like that when it's been pushed down. There should be a little bit of a give, a little bit of a dish. And then this way, as the guitar is laying flat, when we actually take our paintbrush and apply our touch-up paint to these spots, we can build it up with a paintbrush and kind of make it into a bit of a bubble where it's slightly oversized, And then this way, as it dries, it'll start to sink down into these dishes. And with the 400 around here being hit to soften this up and give you this dish, you have a good bonding surface. So now when you put your drop of paint on there and it kicks off and it kind of, gets sucked down and into the dish and it becomes kind of flush, then you can wet sand it with some 800 and then some 15 and some 25 and buff it back. And if you get really close, you'll probably still see the fill, but you're not going to see it from more than a foot or two away. Another great thing is even though this is a translucent finish in which, you do have, after buffing and cleaning, you do have good transparency and you probably be able to see the fill. The truth of it is that the cherry red is actually a bit blinding on stage. So you're not going to be able to see anything, even if the touch up isn't great. And also because it's got a really vivid grain. It being older means we have an even more pronounced grain with a little bit more clarity. It's not uniform. There's darkness and depth and gradients to it. And that particular type of gradients is great. Once you've got that red on there covering this bright spot up, it's going to hide in plain sight because red hides a lot of flaws. This is also another reason why you would never want to buy a red car on a very sunny or on a rainy day. That color is dynamite at hiding flaws. Too often as human beings, we have a propensity to stand back and admire the shade of red, not necessarily its uniformity. So it's one of those colors where you can hide stuff in plain sight, so it's not too bad. Okay, so other than Jameson being cross with me about working instead of playing, basically what we're doing here is, if you see, we're knocking down all the fills with 4-600, kind of getting them smooth, getting them level to where they're really sitting in the finish well, and then just kind of spot buffing. Here we're coming back with 1500, then we're going with 2500, and then we're setting it up for a buff. We're going to see what kind of depth we can get out of that red. Now, when you are wet sanding, don't skip, levels. Don't go from, say, 220 all the way up to 800. You want to kind of work in other steps. So if you're using 1500, then your next step is, going to typically be 2000 to 2500. I'm jumping ahead on 2500 here because I anticipate that I'm going to have to buff this guitar again. We'll go into that later on and why. But essentially at this point, what we're trying to do is just create uniformity and consistency through the texture of the finish. That even though there are flaws in the finish, that if it has a good shine and it looks uniform all the way around the perimeter, that will be in much better shape. And basically, once we finish this work, we're going to be done around all of the outside of the guitar, so we could start to focus on the paint work that's taking place just ahead of the pickup and that one last screw hole that we still haven't wet sanded and blended into the red. All right, you guys, so it's just kind of a quick video today, just showing you how we're knocking down the fill on top of that finish, trying to feather it, trying to get it even. You should be able to basically, with 6 or even 800 grit paper, be able to knock that fill down so smooth that when it is feathered, you should be able to feel it with your fingers. Now, you might have noticed that on the fills that I did, that there were a couple of little pinholes on one side. And actually, as much as I didn't like that coming out as a result, I'm glad it did, because there's something that I forgot to mention earlier in the video. When I was mixing that little bit of black into the red to try to darken the finish down into more of a match for what we've got on the 65 SG, I stirred too fast with that paintbrush. Now, here's something that people don't realize, is that if you actually stir paint too fast, you may inadvertently aerate the mixture. When you do this, you won't necessarily always see it. It could have a ton of small microscopic bubbles or just barely visible bubbles that are in the mixture that when you dry and when it kicks off and when you wet sand, it's now like the surface of the moon, and you're exposing these tiny little craters as these bubbles become unearthed in the finish. That was me mixing the finish too fast. But there is a very easy solution to this. 2 things you can do. Number 1, don't mix the paint too fast, especially with a bristle paintbrush, where air can get trapped in those bristles and then knocked down into the mix, and the paint is thick enough where it might actually hold it. That'd be number 1, don't stir too fast. Number 2, and this is the reason why I'm not upset about that happening on the 65, it's actually a really easy fix. You just go back after a couple weeks as the solvents really had a chance to kick off and cure and become completely hard as a rock, and then go ahead and wet sand with a bit of 1500, a bit of 2000, 2500 and buff, and those little pinholes will disappear. If they don't, and they are actually deep enough where doing a light wet sand doesn't get rid of them, what you could do is you could wet sand with 1500, and then you can do one last very thin application of clear nitro, or you can use that Deft brand stuff that they've got at Home Depot, which is not bad in a pinch, and it's compatible with the Gracey's finish for the most part. And you could do a very, very small touch up on that, wet sand again, and you'll get rid of your pinholes. Me, personally, the front of this guitar has had so many holes in it at this point, I didn't think anybody had noticed if there were any more. I'm very, very pleased with the way it came out. It's got us within the ballpark of reasonability, and it's managed to get us to the point where we've worked on all the bevels around the top side of the guitar, the facade of the guitar, and now we've got a good uniform texture. We've eliminated a lot of micro scratches and swirls and dings and things like that, but we've still got the character of the guitar. We've allowed that clarity of that cherry finish to come through now as the light can finally, you know, get down to the surface of the wood and then be reflected back and show that depth, show the beauty of that finish. Obviously, you can tell by the way I'm talking that this is, like I had mentioned in the last video, a guitar that I'm really, really excited about. So I'm glad that we're taking our time with this, and I'm glad that we're just doing like a part here and there for all the little fixes that this thing does need. Anyway, you guys have a wonderful afternoon. Enjoy the video. We got tons more coming for you guys. I got so many projects coming out of this place. They're getting ready to fall out of the closet. So stay tuned. And if you have subscribed, thank you very, very much. If you haven't, it's up to you. It's your choice. If you like this sort of stuff, you can always come back for it. Anyway, have a beautiful day, and I will see you guys next week. Don't forget to play loud as hell. Do it proper. Hopefully your neighbors are understanding. See you guys.